of Change News.
This is Voice of Change Radio News. I'm Amanda Kumalo. A look at the stories making the headlines. Harare-Beitbridge Highway rehabilitation nears completion. Algeria adds voice against illegal sanctions on Zimbabwe. In business news, Zimbabwe strikes steel deal. In regional and international news, Zimbabwe-Russia strengthening bilateral relations. In sports, Kamambo flouts bail conditions in fight for FIFA equipment. The news in detail. Significant progress has been made in the ongoing rehabilitation of the Harare-Beitbridge Road that was once a death trap but is now turning into a modern road under the watch of the Second Republic. As of now, a total of 354 kilometers along the Harare-Beitbridge Road has now been opened to traffic as government continues to make progress in the rehabilitation of the country's roads under the Emergency Road Rehabilitation Program Phase 2. In the rehabilitation of the country's roads, the focus is not only on major highways, but also those in suburbs that were abandoned by opposition-run councils. Algeria yesterday added its voice to the growing cause for the unconditional removal of the illegal Western financial sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe. This follows last month's SADC Anti-Sanctions Day commemorations held on 25 October, where African countries were unequivocal in their call for the removal of the illegal sanctions. Zimbabwe has received overwhelming support from progressive nations through the universal call for the removal of the financial sanctions imposed by the Western world after the Land Reform Program. Speaking at the Algeria National Day commemorations in Harare yesterday, Algerian ambassador to Zimbabwe, Mr. Noureddin Yazidi, said they stood with the people of Zimbabwe in their struggle for independence against sanctions. In business news, engagements at the Africa Investment Forum 2022, which is ongoing in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, have already paid dividends for Zimbabwe, with one of the deals in steelmaking worth $105 million from a combined portfolio of $265,400,000 under discussion for possible funding having been sealed. The Steelmakers Limited supported project finance venture involved the construction, setup and installation of an integrated steel plant to produce about 300 tons of mentioned mill rod products yearly. There will also be a 300 megawatt power plant. In an interview last night, Steelmakers Limited's Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Kalpesh Patel, confirmed the uptake of the deal, adding that further details will be available in due course. Moving on to regional and international news, Zimbabwe and Russia are set to deepen bilateral cooperation in the economic, security and humanitarian sectors to counter neocolonialism used by Western countries to control developing nations. This emerged during a meeting held between President Mnangagwa and the Deputy Chairman of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, on Tuesday virtually. Zimbabwe and Russia share long historical bonds that were forged during the former's liberation struggle, and since then, the two nations have cooperated on a wide range of issues on the international stage. And finally, in sports, ousted ex-ZIFA President Felton Kamambo could fall foul of the law again in his bid to fight for equipment donated by FIFA that has been earmarked for distribution to grassroots football structures by the association's current board. Kamambo, through his lawyers Rubai and Chatambudza, on Tuesday wrote to ZIFA President Gift Banda seeking to stop a resolution made by Congress at an extraordinary general meeting held last weekend to distribute football equipment to the intended recipients. Kamambo, who is also facing fraud charges, was in February this year barred by the Harare Magistrates Court from acting on behalf of the association in any manner until the trial is complete. That ends this news bulletin.
Voice of Change News.